The past is never dead. It's not even past. You know, Faulkner's got a point there. He really does. Especially when you look at artists revisiting their own work.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into something fascinating along those lines. 𝗧𗕖, Rebirthing Songs with AI and Soul by TATANKA.
Yeah, the source is an article straight from TATANKA's website, and it's about much more than just the tech side of things.
Right. It's really a story about deep personal growth, isn't it? And how that shapes the art.
Absolutely. And stylistic evolution, collaboration, it's all in there.
So taking these old demos, like decades-old analog tapes,
Yeah, snapshots of a past self, really.
and using AI not to replace, but to partner with them, to bring them back to life.
Precisely. It makes you think, you know, about technology unlocking things in our own past work, whatever field you're in.
For sure. So if you're listening and maybe feeling a bit stuck creatively,
Or just curious about AI in the arts.
or honestly, if you just love a good story about transformation, this deep dive has a lot to offer. Definitely. We're going to unpack those key bits from TATANKA's journey.
That emotional growth, the changes in musical style, and how community played a role in this rebirth.
Yeah, the communal synergy aspect is really interesting.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Where did this transformation actually kick off?
Well, the article points to this period of silence.
Silence. Caused by what?
It seems like a mix of things. Burnout, disillusionment, loss, a real convergence.
Wow. Okay, so not just a quiet spell, but a real void.
Exactly. But the crucial part, the article emphasizes the choice to actually engage with that silence.
Not just run from it or fill it up immediately.
Right, to sort of understand it. And that confrontation seems to be the first big step.
Facing the void. That takes courage. How did that change how they even thought about music?
It led to a really fundamental shift. Music stopped being just a profession.
Meaning, like, less about the industry side.
Yeah, maybe less tied to external validation, deadlines, that kind of pressure. It became something more like, well, the article calls it survival and soul making.
Survival and soul making. That's powerful.
It suggests a real turning inward, focusing on what creating meant to them personally.
But the yardstick for success changed. It became internal.
Exactly. That personal connection, that internal resonance, that became the measure.
And the article mentions unlearning and relearning. What does that actually mean for an experienced artist? Sounds tricky.
It does. It implies being willing to, dismantle old habits, assumptions you've held for years.
And emotionally and artistically.
Seems like it. Musically, maybe questioning go-to chords, rhythms, even genres they felt stuck in.
And emotionally, letting go of old hurts.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Or limiting beliefs about what they could do. The article frames music then as a kind of practice.
Like meditation or mindfulness?
Sort of, yeah. A daily commitment to just being present in the process, not obsessing over the final product.
That daily engagement, it probably built a different relationship with the craft itself.
Very likely. A deeper understanding, maybe less fraught.
Okay, so music becomes this daily practice of presence. Did that internal shift show up directly in the sound, like more emotional honesty?
Absolutely. The article highlights a definite change in lyrics and harmonies.
How so?
Well, maybe earlier work focused more on, say, technical skill or hitting a certain market.
Right.
But now, the focus shifted squarely onto genuine emotional expression. Vulnerability wasn't hidden.
It became a strength, a way to connect.
Exactly. It was central, like giving themselves permission to be fully emotionally present in the sound.
That makes sense. And this wasn't purely internal, right? The article mentions reconciling with the past. How did dealing with old stuff, maybe old collaborations, fit in?
That seems crucial. Holding on to old grievances, unresolved conflicts, that can really block creative energy.
Like carrying dead weight.
Pretty much. So the act of forgiving past collaborators, acknowledging those old wounds, it wasn't just personal therapy.
It cleared the decks creatively.
That's the idea. It created the emotional space needed for new ideas, new ways of working, new people to come in.
Addressing the past allowed for openness and self-compassion now.
Yeah, it's like preparing the ground before you plant something new. You need good soil.
Okay, so that emotional foundation is laid. Then the sound itself starts changing. Tell us about this stylistic evolution. It sounds like a real departure.
It really does. What's interesting is how deliberate it was, exploring textures and sounds they'd previously overlooked or avoided.
Things they consciously stayed away from before.
Seems like it. And that led to this really cool fusion. Minimalism, ambient stuff, folk storytelling.
And urban textures. What does that mean?
Maybe incorporating some grittier sounds, field recordings from the city, that kind of thing. A real mix,
The article calls it a declaration of freedom.
which is a great phrase for it. Freedom from self-imposed rules, maybe. Genre boxes. Past expectations.
It suggests a real embrace of experimentation.
Totally. Pushing their own boundaries.
So how did they actually build this new sound? What tools were key?
Instrumentation was huge. They specifically chose things like vintage synths, prepared piano.
Prepared piano, like John Cage style.
Yeah, altering the piano sound. And field recordings, analog cape loops too.
But not just for nostalgia.
No. The article stresses it was about evoking specific moods, specific memories, using sound to tap into emotions or past experiences.
Almost like building a sonic photo album or a memoir.
That's a perfect way to put it. Each sound choice adds to the story, the emotional feel.
And AI might have fit in here, helping manipulate those sounds.
It's possible. Maybe helping to subtly process those old recordings, find hidden sonic details to build on with the new layers, or managing the complexity of those layers.
Interesting. So it wasn't just the sounds, but also the structure of the songs that changed.
Right. They became less linear and more cinematic.
Meaning less verse, chorus, verse.
Probably. More fluid, maybe more narrative-driven, like a journey with ups and downs, dynamic shifts.
Creating a more immersive experience.
Seems like it. Using space, silence, surprises, keeping the listener engaged, wondering what's next. More like watching a film unfold.
And they weren't just inventing this in a vacuum. They were drawing on influences.
Oh yeah, quite a diverse range. Contemporary classical, ambient dub,
Ambient dub, okay.
South American folk, even Japanese ambient jazz. Really broad.
Wow. But the key was how they used those influences.
Exactly. It wasn't about imitation. It was about integrating these elements, filtering them through their own lived experience.
Forging their own unique musical language from these different threads.
Precisely. Deeply personal, even while drawing on a global sound palette.
And again, AI could potentially help analyze those genres, find interesting connections.
It's conceivable. Identifying unique signatures or common threads that TATANKA could then weave into their own thing.
It really feels like this stylistic shift wasn't just superficial. It was deeply tied to that emotional journey we talked about.
Absolutely. That newfound emotional freedom probably unlocked the creative freedom to explore sonically.
The courage to be vulnerable mirrored the courage to experiment with sound.
Well put. They seem completely intertwined.
Okay, so the final piece of this puzzle seems to be collaboration. Communal synergy, the article calls it. How did working with others fuel this rebirth?
It's framed as something really profound, not just, oh, I need a bass player. It was like spiritual renewal.
After being isolated or fatigued?
Yeah, rediscovering the simple joy of making music with other people. But it wasn't just any collaboration.
The type of collaborators mattered.
Hugely. The article emphasizes they were empathic, really attuned to where TATANKA was heading creatively.
People who got it.
Exactly. And who created these safe spaces. That term comes up.
Safe spaces, crucial for vulnerability, especially during a big shift like this.
Definitely. Where experimentation wasn't just allowed, it was encouraged. You need that trust.
And these collaborations weren't limited to just musicians, were they?
No, that's another cool aspect. They worked with visual artists.
Doing what? Mood boards?
Yeah, contributing visual concepts. Poets offered lyrical ideas, different perspectives.
And producers acting almost like therapists.
Co-therapists, the article says, helping shape arrangements that really respected the emotional core of the music.
So this interdisciplinary approach brought in fresh energy.
Totally. Enriched the whole process in ways maybe a purely musical collaboration wouldn't have.
And then involving the audience, too. That seems unusual.
Yeah, opening up studio sessions, asking for feedback.
Blurring the lines between the creator and the listener.
Right. It built this sense of community, like people were invested in this rebirth alongside the artist.
Shared ownership, almost.
Exactly. Deepens the connection significantly.
It sounds like this whole communal thing was also about finding a new balance, a less solitary way to create.
I think so. Moving away from maybe a more isolated, potentially ego-driven way of working.
Towards something more reciprocal.
Yeah, the ensemble work fostered humility, listening skills, that give and take.
Which probably deepened the music itself.
And brought a new lightness, the article says. A sense of fulfillment from that shared experience. Sharing the load, amplifying the rewards.
So we've walked through the emotional growth, the stylistic changes, the communal energy. What's the big picture here, this alchemy of renewal?
Essentially, the article presents 𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗓 as more than just an album project. It's like a potential model, a blueprint for anyone seeking renewal.
In any creative field.
Seems like it. It shows how that deep emotional honesty provides the foundation,
The stylistic exploration opens doors.
and the collaborative spirit provides support and connection. It's the mix of those three.
That creates the creative alchemy, turning experience, even the tough stuff, into art.
Exactly, transforming it.
And the article really contrasts this with, like, just a superficial rebrand.
Right. In a world full of quick makeovers, it highlights that this was quiet, brave, and soulfully earned.
Suggesting that real, lasting artistic change comes from that deeper personal work.
Yeah, genuine growth, not just changing the packaging.
And it leaves us thinking, what kind of art, what kind of music really resonates now?
The final thought is maybe it's not about sheer spectacle. Maybe it's music born not of spectacle, but of metamorphosis.
Music that reflects real transformation, resilience, connecting to something deeper.
That seems to be the implication.
So wrapping up our deep dive on TATANKA's 𝗧𝗧𝗔𝗧𝗔𝗡𝗧 II, it's a powerful story.
It really is. Confronting challenges, embracing new partnerships,
And even seeing how technology like AI can be part of reimagining the past.
alongside that core commitment to personal growth. It all comes together.
What really stands out is how connected it all is. The emotion, the style, the collaboration, they aren't separate boxes.
Not at all. They feed each other. Which raises a question for you listening.
How might these ideas apply to you?
Right, that emotional honesty, that willingness to explore, the power of connection. How does that resonate in your own life or work?
Whether it's creative work or something else entirely.
It makes you wonder how you might approach renewal.
Right. Maybe revisiting something you stalled on, looking at it differently.
Or seeking out new perspectives, collaborating in a new way.
Or just making space for that honest reflection first.
And maybe considering where new tools like AI could fit in. Not just to do the same old things faster.
But to genuinely reimagine or revitalize your approach. Find new possibilities.
Exactly. How can we use these things meaningfully?
Definitely some powerful ideas to mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We hope hearing about TATANKA's journey gives you some food for thought, maybe spark something for your own path.